Alright, this is more of a commentary video than an actual part of the whole create the RPG system, because I just watched another video on YouTube that I don't want to say complained, but made the observation that DungeonTube, the quote-unquote community of Dungeons and Dragons YouTubers, is dying. And I've heard that before. It seems to be an observation that a lot of people are making, and a lot of people are really worried about that. And in certain ways, that makes sense because a lot of people have part of, if not their entire livelihood, attached to the ability to get people to get eyeballs, to get people watching their videos about Dungeons and Dragons. And if people stop watching those kinds of videos, then those people may lose their livelihoods, or at least have to cut down on their income or their hobbies or whatever stake they have put on this. So the broader interpretation of people watching fewer videos about Dungeons and Dragons is that it's a bad thing. And I'm going to be very controversial right now, I fear, because I don't want controversy. It's not what I'm about. I'm about creating stuff. But I have to be controversial on this, because I believe it's a good thing. Or maybe not a good thing as much as a necessary evil, or, I hate saying it this way, but deserved punishment. I believe that DungeonTube is not a good thing. And a lot of that is in the actual name of it, DungeonTube. It's about Dungeons and Dragons. And whether people want to admit it or not, this drop in audience proves beyond a doubt that the DungeonTube community is not primarily creative. It has a lot of creative content, but it's not primarily creative. The primary part, the heart of DungeonTube, is riding the coattails of Dungeons and Dragons. If Dungeons and Dragons is doing well, then DungeonTube is doing well. If Dungeons and Dragons is not doing well, then DungeonTube is not doing well. And some will say that, oh yeah, but this is logical, because it's DungeonTube. It's about a topic. It's supposed to be about that topic. No, it's not. DungeonTube is not supposed to be about Dungeons and Dragons. DungeonTube is supposed to be about role-playing using Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is an integral part of the experience, but only because it's the biggest player on the market. Not because DungeonTube is built around anything that is integral to Dungeons and Dragons. For the purpose of content, you could take out the entirety of Dungeons and Dragons and replace it with something else. Call of Cthulhu, Savage Worlds, GURPS, whatever. You could replace it with another gaming system, and it would technically be the same. The content would not be the same, but the overall work, the overall community around it, the overall function of DungeonTube would be the same. It would be talking about the system. This is a lot like having a movie channel that is entirely centered around the Fast and Furious movies. If you have a movie channel, you should have content about movies. You should not be dependent on one specific movie franchise to survive. You are not a movie franchise fangirl channel. You are a movie channel. A lot of DungeonTube tries to do other things, to do other systems, but the common complaint is that it doesn't draw in the same numbers, doesn't draw in the same kind of audience as doing Dungeons and Dragons. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Dungeons and Dragons is the biggest thing out there, and you are riding its coattails. If you want to not ride the coattails of Dungeons and Dragons, or of any system, you shouldn't just jump from one system to another and ride that coattail instead. If you want your channels to not be dependent on the success of individual systems, or even of role-playing in general, you need to put something on the table that is not already there. Most DungeonTube is pretty much eating its own tail these days. Whenever a new DungeonTube video comes out from any of, I don't know if you can call them the big channels, it's hard to get big in this hobby, but the Dungeon Dudes, or Dungeon Craft, or, my god, they're all called something like Dungeon. But whenever something comes out, 9 out of 10 videos seem to be just another twist on something that already exists. New creatures, how do you do this special thing with the dungeon? It all already exists. You're just doing a minor variant on it. And that's a problem, because when you eat your own tail, all you're doing is devouring yourself. You won't grow from that. DungeonTube needs to, I don't want to say destroyed, but it needs to unwind. It needs to be disassembled and reassembled into something that is its own thing. And that's not easy. The easy thing is to just ride the coattails of something successful. That's why everybody's saying, oh, maybe we'll be saved by the next season of Stranger Things, because that'll blow new life into Dungeons and Dragons, and then we can all continue as we already did and be dependent on that. We can suckle on the teats of Wizards of the Coast and just nourish ourselves from their success. No, you need your own success. You need to start investing in something that you're a part of. You need to create your own. I know it's not as easy as just commenting on the latest screw-up from Wizards of the Coast in some legal document, or the latest D&D class that's been changed into something that's either horrible or overpowered or really weird. It's easy to just comment on what other people do, but that does not create a stable community. That creates a community of fangirls. Even if it's negative fangirls that just whack on everything that Wizards of the Coast do, you are not your own thing. You need to be your own thing. I would argue that no DungeonTube, I hate calling it DungeonTube because that's a Dungeons & Dragons reference, no RPG channel, no tabletop RPG channel should be allowed to exist unless the people behind it are actively publishing something, unless they are adding something new to the table. And I'm not talking about just a fanzine that has a new subclass each month for D&D. I'm talking about their own thing, something they have control over, something that is theirs to mold, something they have creative control over. Maybe they don't have complete control over it, but they need creative control over it. They need that to drive their channel. Because if you're just commenting on what's happening in the Dungeons & Dragons quote-unquote community, which is not a strong community anymore, then you're not really adding anything to the table. That means you are not needed. And that means you should not be... I'm sorry, but that means that you deserve to fail. If all you do is comment on what's happening and not bring anything new to the table, you are not needed. You need to bring something to the table, other than riding the coattail of the next D&D scandal, or the next D&D release, or the next big D&D show like Dimension 20 or Critical Role. You need to do your own thing. And then you can compare or comment on the big things out there. Ask yourself, has this tabletop role-playing game channel ever done anything major on the big games that are not Dungeons & Dragons? Have they done Call of Cthulhu, for example? Or have they done anything on the classics? Have they looked into Paranoia RPG? Have they looked into Traveller? Or is all they are doing just commenting on Dungeons & Dragons? Because if they are just commenting on Dungeons & Dragons, even if they're using the excuse that it's what draws in the numbers, then they are not really that vital to anyone. And losing them is not a big loss. For a community to exist, it needs a purpose of its own. It cannot just exist to look at something else. I'm going to stop it here because if I continue, I'm going to get a little more controversial, and I'm not sure I'm ready for the backlash from that. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry if people's feelings are hurt. I'm not here to create drama, but I'm also not here to just pat you on the back and say that everything you're doing is just fine, when that's not my opinion. So take it or leave it. I'm going to go back to trying to assemble my new body. See ya.